Good afternoon and welcome to this month's show. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss best practices with emergency communications and public safety strategies in the federal government. With me on today's show are Billy Bob Brown, Executive Assistant Director for Emergency Communications Division, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Wade Whitmer, Deputy Director, Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, National Continuity Programs, FEMA Resilience Office. Lori Flatery, Coordinator, National 911 Program, Department of Transportation, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Nicholas Nyland, Director, Public Sector Product Management at Verizon. Mornay Erasmus, Director, Smart Spaces at CommScope. And Marcus Claycomb, National Business Development Manager, Public Sector, Panasonic Mobility. Well, this is certainly a very important subject to every individual and very timely, right? Here we are in the first month or month and a half of hurricane season. And quite frankly, I think we all recognize that this technology is so important and minutes really matter. We've discovered that. We've seen that over and over and over in a very complex environment now that we're in a full mobile type of capability. Billy Bob Brown, let's start with you. Where does CISA fit into this? How does CISA fit into the whole emergency comms ecosystem?
Well, great. Thank you. And I would like to start just right off the bat, thanking the Federal News Network for your commitment to this important conversation on emergency communications and facilitating the discussion. I hope that this will lead your important listeners to continue to partner with us to drive the improvement of nationwide interoperability for the safety of our citizens. We've all watched, most recently in Miami, the collapse of that apartment complex and the harrowing bravery of the first responders working to save lives. And in emergency communications, we recognize that every second counts. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency has the vision to improve security and resilience of the nation's critical infrastructure through emergency communications. We recognize that improving nationwide interoperability will dramatically reduce national systemic risk across all of the 55 national critical functions.
Right. And, I said minutes matter. You made a correction there. And I think you very astutely, seconds matter in these situations, right? So important to make sure that we've got real-time communications all the time, inside a building, outside a building, et cetera. Wade Whitmer, why don't you tell us what is IPAWS, first of all, and then tell us what's the state of that whole program these days?
Hey, thank you. Yeah, IPAWS. So the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System we like to use the tag term that it is a national system for local alerting. It is based on, the requirement that the president can get a warning to the nation that's been around since at least 1934 with the Communications Act when they stood up the FCC, but has been greatly expanded in the last 10 years into the integrated public alert and warning. So we've grown beyond your radio and television to be able to push alerts into people's cell phones and know weather radio directly from emergency managers and public safety officials that are able to send alerts through IPAWS. And then we're continuing to expand into internet devices and other display methods, anyways, to get emergency information directly into the public. This year, or actually I should say last year, 2020, the pandemic year, has been a real expansion. We almost got subsumed with use of the system. It was unprecedented. Almost 3 times more alerts were sent by local authorities and state authorities in 20 than in any previous year. And we began receiving phone calls very early on in March, before most of the shutdowns happened, for alerting authorities looking for advice and guidance to use it for the emergency that the pandemic became. I think with that comfort level, that just continued to grow, and we're continuing to see expanded usage for all sorts of alerts. And we have since been able to leverage the little bit of bad news that happened last year to receive some resources to stand up a 24/7 call center. So we are now available around the clock to provide guidance and assistance to public safety officials that are looking to most efficiently get emergency information to people when they need to.
You know, it was interesting. There was this gap when people started to get these mobile technologies and can I get information on there? I know we'll talk about 911 in a minute. And now, you know, so often, I mean, certainly you're pumping those messages out. It's not uncommon to be sitting in a room and all of a sudden, boom, 4 or 5 people will get this message at the same time. And you know something's up. So it seems to be working well. And I'm glad to see that it's getting much more use. Speaking of the 911 system, Lori, boy, we started with 911 several years ago. I'm sure you'll tell us when it started. And it's not the 911 it was 15 years ago. It's much more sophisticated, isn't it?
Absolutely. First of all, Luke, thank you for allowing me to be here today. I really appreciate the opportunity. For those that aren't familiar with the 911 program, we have 3 jobs. We convene all of the 911 stakeholders in the public and private sector to bring them together to decide for themselves how to move forward on issues that are important to them. We collect and create resources for the folks at the state and local level that actually operate the nation's 911 system. And we administer a grant program specifically for the upgrade of the technology of 911, which is really old. But we're showing signs of progress. I mean, to give you just a couple examples from this past year, you know, during the pandemic, we did a lot of work to support the 911 centers. They didn't have a continuity of operations plan for infectious diseases. And so we pulled groups together. I mean, they're used to like outages and, you know, infrastructure kinds of outages, but they're not used to this kind of thing. So we pulled them together to develop that kind of a plan, which ultimately was translated into Spanish and shared among 30 or 35 countries in Central and South America. The 911 centers also showed an enormous amount of ingenuity in basically setting up ad hoc methods to divert low acuity calls for medical service because they were becoming inundated. And sometimes they stood up these systems within, you know, 1 or 2 days. So they showed an enormous amount of innovation and ingenuity. On the broader scale, the states are really making progress in terms of improving and their infrastructure to a digital internet-based infrastructure, which will allow them to use multimedia images, and it allows them to connect, which means that there's a level of resilience that just wasn't there in the old system. They're making progress, not as quickly as we would like, but they continue to make progress. And there are also states that are now in the process of figuring out how they're going to interconnect with their neighboring states. Because ultimately what we want to end up with is an interconnected system of system. So there are pockets of that in at least 6 places in the United States. And so we're encouraged by that. There's a lot of progress that's going on.
Glad to hear that the program continues to grow and advance and align with the various technologies that are becoming available. Speaking of which, Nicholas, you can't make these things happen, the 911 program, the PAWS program, et cetera, IPAWS, unless you have some connectivity in place real time, right? So where does Verizon fit into the ecosystem of the emergency comm system?
You said it exactly right, Luke, and I appreciate having the opportunity to be here and you leading this conversation on such an important topic. Verizon has been committed to public safety communications since we became Verizon 21 years ago, and really our emphasis is on the reliability of the networks and the communication infrastructure so that those alerts can get to the end users, so that consumers, citizens can make calls to 911. And so that first responders have the most reliable network that they can rely on. And what we've seen over our 21 years is really first responders using Verizon, relying on Verizon. And so now the majority of first responders use Verizon for their wireless services. And that's because of that reliability. And we talked a little bit about the pandemic over the course of the last year that we've all been dealing with. And during that time, Verizon recently was awarded our 16th win in a row from Root Metrics for reliability and our 27th win in a row for JD Power for overall network reliability and network performance. So in spite of the immense extra loads on the network and stress on the network, we continue to outperform. And that's something we're incredibly proud of. And over the course of the last year, it's not just about maintaining a reliable network, but it's also about restoring that network when necessary or supporting our first responders in relief efforts. We had our Verizon response team out deployed at over 160 different engagements over the course of the last year. And we've donated $55 million to first responders and frontline workers and their missions over the course of the last year during the pandemic that help feed the front line and numerous other programs, something we're incredibly proud of, that ongoing support.
We certainly appreciate it. And it's an interesting dynamic there when you get into these bad states, whether it's a wildfire, a hurricane, a tornado, people then are relying on these communications even more. And you all have to make sure you're resilient enough to work your way through that. Morny, I know that CommScope, that's a big part of what you all do. Can you explain to the audience, what is CommScope? How do you fit into this picture?
Afternoon, Luke. Thank you for having us. Yes, CommScope is a global infrastructure provider. So we provide the wireline connectivity from copper, fiber, hybrid cables to all these service providers and network builders, to also the wireless side of the business. We are the only global company with such a broad reach, from the cell tower to indoor coverage, DAS systems, Wi-Fi systems. So anything wireless that's really at the edge to the backhaul capacity, and helping our partners like AT&T on FirstNet, how they roll that out, Verizon with their One Fiber, building up the robust backbone for all this new edge devices to be connected. And we're very excited about also helping these network providers with the 5G network as they build out these new capabilities on the newer, more densified network. How do we bring along emergency communications on that and extend coverage everywhere we need that, to really help with that flexible, scalable, and adaptable networks as we build that out for the future, from outdoor to indoor coverage.
Yeah, that stitching on the backbone is so important in all cases, whether it's an emergency or a non-emergency. Very important to have that connectivity in place. Marcus, we all think about Panasonic. We know the tough books. You can get up in the helicopter, throw it out, land, open it up, turn it on. It's going to work every time. But boy, Panasonic's way bigger than that when it comes to this subject. Tell us how you all fit into the overall ecosystem and what you all are doing state to state there at Panasonic.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm proud and honored to represent Panasonic, and personally honored to be in this group of very important people today. We are celebrating our 25th anniversary of the Tough Book line, and we are very well known for that. But Panasonic is really a solutions company, so it's not just the hardware; it's the solution sets that go with it. And as you mentioned, it is an ecosystem. One of the ones I'd like to highlight, to give you an example of that, is the N1 Tactical. It is a computer. It is the size of a personal use cell phone. It happens to also be a phone, and a camera and a scanner and some add-ons that you can add to it. And what we're moving towards, and really the industry is creating smaller, faster, more multi-capable devices to let our first responders do their job more efficiently and more effectively. And when we partner that hardware with reliable cell phone communications and a priority traffic for our first responders, so that they are getting first bite at the apple in the communications, that reliable communications, it allows for situational awareness and information transfer. And those are two incredibly important things when we talk about dynamic and pre-planned events. So this can be done in a pre-planned large scale concert. And fortunately, as you mentioned earlier, hurricanes are kind of pre-planned, so we can kind of prepare for those, but also dynamic events like the collapse in South Florida and like active threat events. And when you add into that a multi-agency and multi-discipline response, the ability for those units to communicate real time and effectively is incredibly important and not always easy to do. So when you add software like ATAC, or the Android Tactical Assault Kit, that the military has been used to for some time, but is now available in the public sector, we can not only have that communication and information transfer, but we can track assets and personnel and communicate over multi-agency, multi-discipline response real time also feeding video from UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, and robots, and feed video real time into command and control, which is vitally important when deploying assets to address those issues.
In a real-time fashion. Well, thank you very much, and we're honored to have you here. Lori, you touched on some various activities that are going on. Can you highlight one specific program you'd like to highlight that you all perhaps have finished, are in the process of implementing, or got it in the hopper?
I can think of a couple projects that are really leaning forward in terms of the technology. We've developed a partnership with the Science and Technology Directorate at DHS, along with Mr. Brown's shop. One of the projects is to develop an interoperability testing model. So if we're going to end up with a system of systems, we need to make sure that the interconnections work the way we want them to. And so this model would set up an objective way to measure that function to make sure that it happens. They're also looking at using artificial intelligence in the 911 center. You know, as we continue to incorporate multimedia, for example, you know, if a 911 center gets multiple videos, which one is the relevant one? How does that get incorporated into the 911 call taking and processing system without overloading the telecommunicators? So we're excited about those projects because we think they have great potential to sort of solve problems as the system evolves.
Yeah, really trying to stay in line with the technology, and this interoperability capability is so important to do that. Mornay, how about CommScope? What's the give us a specific program that you all are working on that's bolstering up and enabling this emergency comm ecosystem?
Yeah, I think there's really a host coupling with commercial 5G rollout. How do we support FirstNet's extended coverage on that? Also, Verizon, we talked about Verizon's One Fiber. How do we beef up the backhaul? It's always amazing to me when people start talking about 5G and say, well, it's all going to be wireless. Why do you need wires? Like, you do understand there's no wireless without a wire somewhere. We need a lot more wires on the back end. And how do we beef up that robustness? And then I think the merge and the convergence of private networks. We're seeing a lot of private networks, especially for temporary emergency coverage. So we're working on rapid deployment units that's mobile, that you can quickly move around, telescopic pulse, scale out, and bring up a private network very, very fast for those temporary networks type of solutions. I think that's something that's very exciting for us.
Sure. Very important too, as we stitch together the entire ecosystem. Billy Bob, how about over at CISA? Tell us about a specific program you all are focusing on.
Sure, thanks. And you know, I just love the global nature of this this conversation, right? You know, because all around the world, and especially as we think about our own country, it really is about safety of the citizen, and our public safety and first responders. You know, getting to an incident, having the command and control capabilities interoperably across multiple disciplines, multiple jurisdictions, multiple agencies, you know, is critical to ensuring the safety of those citizens. And what we've been working with in partnership with more than 65 public safety communications related associations across the nation in our SafeCom team is the advancement of our understanding of interoperability. Just most recently, we published a new interoperability continuum that SafeCom developed that recognizes in the all IP environment the criticality of cybersecurity to the technology lane.
You want to explain SafeCom real quick, just so people understand what that is, what is that apparatus?
Sure. SafeCom is a public safety communications related program that the department stood up several years ago. We've been working in partnership, as I mentioned, with more than 65 public safety associations. We have over 100 participant members that join with us regularly, providing voluntarily their time to share best practices, to share information, to work through lessons learned, and develop techniques, develop tools that can be used by public safety communications officials across the nation to improve and to drive interoperability for emergency communications.
Yeah, it's really a platform that pulls that all together. Appreciate that explanation for the audience there. All right, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about emergency communications and public safety, and we were talking specifically about, well, specific programs. I'd like to throw it over to you, Nicholas. Give us an example of a specific program that Verizon is working on to bolster this whole ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. You've probably seen over the last few months our Verizon Frontline campaign, right? So this is our umbrella term for everything that we're doing to support public safety, from always on priority and preemption services. So first responders have first access to the network and can remove consumers from the network, to our local network command solutions to increase prioritization, our mission critical push to talk services that we launched last year. So everything falls into Verizon Frontline, and that's definitely our biggest program. But the one I want to touch on really quickly is our Verizon response team. This is run by a peer of mine here at Verizon, in place since 2013. And this has always been a team that has run to crisis. That's part of our mantra. I said in the opening that they've engaged with public safety to respond to either planned events or unplanned events 160 times just last year. And what they've done is they've expanded that team. They've added more deployable units. They've added more capabilities on community relief with our Big Red trailer. Sometimes you just need to show up and hand out water, provide air conditioned tents, to provide a command and control center that we can share with public safety. But what they've also done over the course of the last year is they've all gotten 107 certified. So now they're all certified drone pilots. And what that's allowed them to do is actually bring their own drones, both for commercial network coverage, as well as just situational awareness, working hand in hand with public safety to be able to share situational awareness from a bird's eye view has been incredibly powerful and helpful to be able to support relief efforts. Everything from the terrible situation down in Miami to the crash of the Air Force pilot last year, to many, many more situations. And that team, again, works side by side first responders, and that's something we're incredibly proud of, the legacy of commitment there and where we're going next.
Wow, that's interesting. I hadn't heard about the drone program. That's fascinating. Once again, another emerging technology that's being brought in to bolster public safety. Wade, how about at the IPAWS program? Can you give us a specific example of something that you all are working on, a project, a program that you'd like to highlight for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'm going to sneak two in here.
Okay.
First, I'll talk about is really ramping up our support to the people that have their fingers on the keyboard that are trying to send a message. So front end, helping them with practicing, developing guidance, kind of incorporating that piece into the communication centers that are needing to communicate with the public. And then providing them, of course, on the back end when they need that support with what's going wrong, why is my message not going out? And then I'd be remiss to not mention the work that I don't see as much of, but is big time work going on in the background by the wireless providers, by the private sector infrastructures that actually communicate with people. IPAWS, we don't get any message to any person without that partnership with the private sector. And right at the end of 2019, there was a little bit of a change in the participation rules for the wireless industry that expanded the number of characters and also laid out what's called enhanced geotargeting, which is the ability for the phone to make the decision on whether it should display the alert to the person or not based on their location, if they're inside or outside the polygon. That's been a huge effort in the background by the wireless providers. They have been not only rolling that out, that capability into new phones as the phones turn over in the population, but also continually tweaking their networks on the back end to make it happen that the alerts get to all the phones that happen to be in a polygon and then let those phones decide. There's a lot of continued effort to go there, but that links really just the continued enhancement of that capability of how those alerts get to you in your cell phone, and what you can do with that alert information once it gets there is really continuing to improve really the effectiveness of getting people out of the way when there's an emergency incident going on.
No question, you really can't effectively implement these programs unless the technology is there. So hats off to all the technology companies to again, build this out as quickly as it's needed to be built out, and to harden it so that it's available in these really tricky situations that we often find ourselves in these days. Marcus, how about at Panasonic? Can you give us an example of a specific program you'd like to highlight?
Absolutely. So I'd like to refocus on ATAC, our partnership with the Android Tactical Assault Kit, which all of our products, but specifically this, certainly rely on what Nick had advised on. It's not only reliable, but it's that priority traffic for the first responders so that they get first bite at the apple in these type of situations. But as I mentioned, all the great benefits of ATAC before, one of the other things I'd like to focus on is when you're able to track the assets, especially in a multi-agency response, you can avoid blue on blue situations when you have that information transfer between those agencies. And that is hugely important in the first responder community, whether it be a search and rescue operation or a ever evolving real-time active threat. So,
and if I may, blue on blue, for those that might not know what that term means.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the good guys running into situations where they are in a threat situation from another good guy. And we don't ever want to be in those situations if we can avoid it. So whether that be the military or first responder, law enforcement specifically, we need to know where all the good guys are so that we can use command and control to the best of our ability and efficiently deploy. One of the other projects in a broad spectrum that Panasonic has is the LEAC, the Law Enforcement Advisory Council. So this affects everything we do and all of the projects that we work on. We have a very diverse populace of subject matter experts in the field, from small, medium, and large law enforcement agencies, some sworn, some CIOs, and some IT professionals that advise us on two major topics. One is what technology already exists in the field and how can we make it better, more efficient, more effective, and most importantly, safer for the end user. And then the other side of that is what are the need voids in the marketplace and how can we use technology to address those? So we are always looking for the opportunity to listen to the end user that we're trying to provide that service to and make things better and ultimately safer, because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing.
Sure, and we really appreciate all the extended effort there. Let's roll over to priorities. Billy, I'm going to start with you. I know you've got a laundry list of priorities. We'd like to hear about the top 2 or 3 that you're focusing your attention on this year.
Sure. Thank you. Really, it's 3 critical areas of focus that we have that we're trying to build in partnership with communicators across the nation, across all of public safety, across all of the critical infrastructure, across all of the national security and emergency preparedness community to ensure that we're working together harmoniously. So first and most important is obviously nationwide interoperability. It really does take a constellation of network service providers and a constellation of partners working together to seamlessly move information to ensure that those mission essential operations are able to get right to the public when they need help most. The second priority really is continued focus by our SafeCom team and working in partnership across the nation with statewide interoperability coordinators and the National Council of Statewide Interoperability Coordinators to improve integrated and effective collaborative communications planning. It really is communicators working together during those day-to-day kinds of incidents, those day-to-day kinds of concerns where we're trading business cards in blue sky, not trying to wait till the hurricane happens to trade business cards, to understand requirements that each has in their separate organization, their separate agency or jurisdiction or discipline to make an effective communications plan to ensure that information can seamlessly, interoperably occur. And so continuing to drive towards the improvement and the addition of other communicators into the team to enhance the ability of collaborative communications planning across the nation is critical for us to really achieve nationwide interoperability. And third and finally is really the advancement of the use of priority across the nation. It really is having priority access in a mobile environment, in a wired environment, to ensure that information seamlessly and efficiently and expeditiously can get to those operators when they need it most. Because as we talked about a little bit more earlier, that every minute counts, every second counts when we're trying to save lives.
Right. Sort of as you said on that second one, it's like the old saying, dig the well before you're thirsty, right? Type of situation. So very important. Nice, crisp set of priorities there. Thank you, Billy. Mornay, what do you all have in the hopper as far as priorities? What's the demand signal that you're responding to out there?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Especially around building scalable solutions in the 5G domain between commercial cellular and in private networks. That I think is definitely very important on the wireless side. And then on the wired side, building a robust backbone around, you've got more networks now, IoT, you got more spectrum being available, and realizing that it's not just the connectivity you're delivering, but also power. Every edge device there needs power and connectivity. So how can we combine those two and deliver it together? Simply, easier, and scalable. And then I think lastly, which is a lot of times overseen here, is concealment solutions. We're putting more and more edge devices out there in the public domain. How will we conceal this so it's more applicable for the citizens out there in their general day-to-day life and make it not so obtrusive in their face kind of thing.
All right, interesting and very important, and no question about that. Lori, priorities for 911 this year?
Well, there are a couple of things that we're looking at that I think will be really helpful. Well, one of the things that has happened over the last few years is that there's been an emphasis mostly on the state and local jurisdictions that operate 911 centers. There are literally hundreds that are operated by federal agencies who haven't been part of the conversation. Departments like the Department of Defense, the Coast Guard, Park Service. And so we're working really hard with our federal partners to make sure that they become part of the conversation, that they establish the relationships that they need to in order to be interconnected within the jurisdictions that they reside. The second thing that we are looking at the behest of the community is what I would call sort of establishing a little bit more uniform technical specifications for the interconnection of 911 and whatever broadband network 911 uses. And the idea behind that is that, if 911 gets a photograph of a suspect, how will it get out to the patrol car? And we want to make sure that however that happens, it's understood in a way that is consistent so that information can be shared not only to the field, but back again. So I think those two will be really exciting.
Right. And I think about video, pictures, and text too, right? Now, all three of those really important to get integrated into the 911 ecosystem. Marcus, top priority for Panasonic this year. What are you focusing on?
Well, we're focusing on that mobility aspect and the stronger, faster, and more capable, but also more mobile hardware options. And in addition to that, with our existing Toughbook line, we're wanting to make the solutions a single piece of hardware that can address multiple issues, and that we're unifying the hardware, software, and solution sets to the best of our ability. We're shooting for that single pane of glass solution set for the end user when and where applicable. In any case, whether it be a single tool that solves all issues or multiple tools in the toolbox, we want a one-stop shop opportunity for our clients for ease of use and service. And with the extremely low failure rate of the Panasonic products, it's very rare, but when it is needed, the quickest turnaround possible, so that there is rarely, if ever, a time that they don't have that product in their hands.
Got to have that capability all the time, real time. Wade, how about at IPAWS? What's the top couple of priorities for you this year?
Yeah, one is we're continuing to work. We've seen a gap where what we feel we need to do is ingrain kind of the thought of emergency communications to the public. So sending of alerts early and effectively and in a timely fashion to the public within the emergency communications community and in those programs, into the operations center and into the operations plans of those public safety agencies across the plethora of where they sit, especially at the local level. So, you know, at the local level, those true first responders are your local public safety officers. They're the people on the ground. We want, and typically the sending of an alert, the thought of actually sending something to the public to let them know what's going on or encourage them to take protective actions is in many cases at the local level a secondary duty, right? It's assigned to somebody else who has a curriculum and a certification in some other piece of the emergency communications spectrum, but not necessarily a lot of training or background in how can I effectively get some information to people to have them take some protective actions to both protect lives and really assist the response efforts and those recovery and what happens in recovery after that emergency happens. That's a big priority for us. Haven't exactly cracked the nut on how to get that all done, but we are leaning in to create some tools. I mentioned before guidance and training. We're also on the cusp of bringing in some folks to assist us with developing some automated message writing tools that can assist those guys, those people when they're under the gun, so to speak, and the clock is ticking and they need to get a message to the public to let them know what's coming.
Right, and under a tremendous amount of pressure, stress is high. Interesting concept too about the recovery part of this. So important, right? You are really getting a handle on getting that message out. Hey, the tornado's coming, the flood's coming, etc. But then, you know, the response piece of that's so important as well. Once the tornado has arrived. Nicholas, how about at Verizon? Top priority for you all over there this year?
Yeah, I'm going to say three very quickly. One is the continued reliability of the network. That is fundamental to everything else we do. The second is we're running fast after 5G, right? Making sure 5G can become a reality and not just you know, the promise of the future and making it real this year. And then the third, really, I'm going to piggyback on Mr. Brown and Ms. Flaherty on interoperability. It's absolutely key and critical to everything that we do. And Verizon is committed to making sure our products and services are interoperable. And it's not good enough just to say that because now we're on cell phones and LTE, that I can call you and you can call me across networks and we can text. There needs to be more than that for first responders. And that's priority services across networks. And I think WPS and CISA have done a great job of leading the effort there. We're proud to make sure that our WPS interoperates with our peer networks that also provide WPS. We've engaged that. We've started that process. We need to expand that to all priority services. And then we go beyond that into our mission critical push-to-talk. Radio services on a cell phone that have priority and preemption built in and have the ability to do media and video are fantastic. But they work much better when they work well across networks to other mission critical push-to-talk solutions or land mobile radio. And so when we launched mission critical push-to-talk last year, we proved that our system can work across networks and to LMR and back. Very, very robust solutions for first responders that make sure that they work when they need it, that we share business cards before the event. I love that example. And that's something that we've done. And we're reaching out to all of our carrier peers to make sure that we do that before the worst case scenario happens. And so that's our vision of interoperability, that the LTE networks are good today for interoperability. They can be even better when we come together to support first responders.
And that interoperability is so important. You mentioned WPS, wireless priority service, allowing you to gain access, cut through the congestion in the event of an emergency if you're authorized. So it's a very important program that the good folks over there at CISA run. All right, we're going to take another break and we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about emergency communications and public safety. Very important program here, very timely, I might add. We're just getting ready to start talking about lessons learned. And Lori, I'm going to start with you. You've been at this program for quite some time. 9/11's been around for a while. What are the lessons learned that you're gleaming out there that you'd like to impart to the audience here?
I think one lesson that we've learned over and over again is that the most valuable, the most precious resource are the people, the telecommunicators who answer the 911 calls. We've really learned that in the last year. The pressure that those folks are under on a day-to-day basis, and what they will continue to experience as they not only hear 911 calls but see them. That'll be an important issue to address. We have data that shows that up to 25% of telecommunicators actually suffer from some form of PTSD. So addressing those things now, as the multimedia is being incorporated into their process, becomes really important. We developed a resource for those folks called NG911, or Next Generation 911 for telecommunicators, because there's an awful lot of misconception out there and anxiety about how the technology will change their jobs. In some ways it'll help, so that publication was written by them, for them, and we just want to make sure that their needs are being addressed.
Very important topic, very important subject, very important to point out that when these programs are needed the most is when the stress is high, the anxiety is high. These things need to work, they need to be simple. Wade, how about at the IPAWS program? What's the lessons learned that you're gleaming that you'd like to communicate with the community here?
Yeah, I'm going to lean right in on people with Lori. We are just past 10 years since the IPAWS system became operational. And when we kind of redid the program office to start that off, we're all engineers. And I think when I look at around the screen here, most of the folks on here, we talk about communications, we're systems people, right? I think very important is to lean in on making sure that those systems fit with the people on the front end, those operators. It has to support the way they do business. And then for us on the back end, really, how is that message getting through that private sector infrastructure and being displayed to the people that we're trying to get to move, to do something or to take shelter? So really, I think not just engagement on the front end where, in our systems training, you do your requirements development and you bring in your operator, then you build something and then you throw it out to them. Really, that engagement continually and throughout, I think is a big lesson for us, is that we need to have those operators in our development cycle the whole way through. And then I can't bring the public in necessarily, but at least people that really understand or are on the leading edge of how do you get people to change their behavior by sending them a text message. So that's big lessons learned for us, and the piece that we're leaning into really hardest here in the next year or so.
All about the people, that customer experience, if you will, right? The capability's got to be there, and it's got to be easy to use in those kind of stressful situations. No question about it. Billy Bob Brown, how about from your perspective, lessons learned that you're discovering there?
Sure, I'd like to lean in as well on the people issue, but from just a slightly different perspective, in that it takes people to partner. That as we're trying to build a partnership across the nation to improve the ability of emergency communications to support operators, one of the lessons that we've learned as we've been watching in this fiscally constrained environment that we're in, seeing challenges all across the nation, certainly at the state, local, territorial, tribal levels, as well as the federal government and the various agencies. As we look at the expansion of the Internet of Things and the availability for us to have connected devices that provide insights and that can improve some of our day-to-day lives, the way that we perform our operations as well. The increased necessity for partnerships to get after some spectral efficiencies and funding challenges, where we can find that sharing of communication systems infrastructure, really becomes the height of partnering. And that's what we've learned just most recently over this past year in the federal space with our Emergency Communications Preparedness Center that includes 14 departments and agencies all working together to improve emergency communications for those responders at the federal level. We've seen federal agencies that have been working in partnership with each other, in partnership with state and locals to share infrastructure, to share spectrum, to ensure that in a combined fashion we can take advantage of infrastructure that allows us to move together faster, because truly we were able to solve problems faster when we work together.
Very good point. Very good catch there. And again, the stitching it all together, and that's where this interoperability, I think, really comes into play as well, along with the leverage. All right, we're going to wrap it up with this last question that we love to ask. And I'm going to start with you, Marcus, at Panasonic, in regards to tell us what it looks like in a couple of years. And not so much what's in the Petri dish there at Panasonic labs, but perhaps something that we can expect to start to see in the next 2 to 3 years to continue to address this very important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're certainly not alone in this, but we're hoping to lead the charge in our vector of the industry. And that is partnering with our end users and clients to ensure that we are doing everything we can with them to prepare for 5G implementation. And we have found that those discussions need to be had so that they know what they can do to build out the infrastructure and make preparations to get the most out of 5G when it is fully deployed. And as the director said, the expansion of the IoT, the Internet of Things, and the need to focus on the expanding cybersecurity issues that go with that are conversations that we're having now, so that we are all prepared as a group to get the most out of 5G and use it to the best of our ability and smartly.
Really do appreciate everything that you all are doing to help bolster this ecosystem. Mornay, how about over at CommScope? What's it looking like in a couple of 3 years for you all there in regards to capability, new capability?
I think we're very excited about this whole first responder 5G coverage as we bring it along at the larger scale and bringing this private public networks together, and then really leveraging on 5G. Everybody's talking about 5G, but low latency applications. I think that's really where the next frontier is, where we're going to leverage digital resources across a much broader spectrum. Take a forward deployment field hospital, where you now could have access to robotic surgery and a limitless supply of digital surgeons across the globe help you with that. Medical records, on an instance, you can have all the medical records available any part of the world. So those kind of low latency applications, I think, is really what's going to change the game for us in the future.
Right, and very important to understand this 5G capability once it's fully rolled out, how comprehensive of a capability that's going to be put into everybody's hands, so to speak. And I'm sure the federal folks here are thinking all about that. Nicholas, you're right in the middle of this 5G. What's it going to look like in 2 to 3 years, whether it's 5G or whatever else Verizon has in the hopper to roll out? Tell us what that's going to look like in about 3 years.
Yeah, I think the best way to understand where the future is what are we testing today? And to look at the test beds that are popping up across the country. And our partnership with public sector, with public safety specifically, is really showing us where we're going. And one of those I'll highlight is Stafford County, Virginia, and their 5G test bed. So we're working with them on 5G enabled drones, as well as intelligent video over a drone. So getting live video surveillance or live video over a relief effort or recovery effort through that drone. And they cover 95. And so if there's an accident, they'd love to be able to send a drone out there to see it before an officer or an EMT can actually get out there, get eyes on scene quicker. And 5G allows for that, especially with the computer vision that's built into the intelligent video platform. And then the other side of the country I'll mention is Marine Corps Base Miramar, and the work that they're doing on their 5G living lab on a Marine Corps base to understand exactly how the Marine Corps could leverage 5G. And if you didn't see the news recently in the last few weeks, Verizon rolled out a pretty cool new vehicle out there called Thor, Tactical Humanitarian Operations Response Vehicle. And that is a massive truck that's basically a 5G network on wheels. That's automated, that's able to be deployed from a tablet, and sets up a 5G coverage bubble. And what we've worked with them on is some relief efforts and some efforts on better situational awareness tools coming out of that 5G bubble. So those two sides of the country, I think, are really interesting test beds that'll show where we're going over the next couple of years.
Interesting and fascinating, and we really appreciate all the hard work there. Lori, how about at the 911 program? If I'm, for all of us, we're always interested in thinking about the enhancements that are going to happen with the 911 program. What are we typically going to see in about 3 years?
We're seeing more and more 911 centers have the capability, once they move to that next generation of 911 that's digital and based on an internet model, to be able to transfer calls, so that in the event of a large incident, calls don't get, remain unanswered. They'll be able to transfer them to another 911 center who isn't overloaded. Or in the case of a natural or man-made disaster, that's another incident where it'll become really important to be able to transfer calls. That's not possible now. But once 911 centers become incorporated into that new model, that resilience is built into it. So we're seeing more and more 911 centers be able to do that. I think the second thing goes back to what I talked about before in terms of the interconnection of the entire emergency communications ecosystem. I think we're going to begin to see examples where 911 will receive, for example, a photograph of a suspect, and we'll be able to get that photograph out to the patrol car. So I think those two things show enormous promise, and we'll probably start to see that within the next couple of, or 2-3 years.
So if I have a call and whether it's a wreck or a situation, I can snap a photograph, send it to the 911 center, and then they can get it out to the cruiser on the scene, so to speak.
Yeah, assuming that NG 911 structure is in place, and assuming that all the pieces are connected, that will.
Can I text a 911 center now?
I'd say about half of the 6,000 or 7,000 911 centers can receive text messages now. Okay. There is a map on the FCC's website. They actually collect information with regard to 911 centers that are ready to receive text messages. So that would probably be the most reliable source of that information.
All right.
It's dependent on funding and, governance kinds of issues.
Sure. Well, that's good. And that's good to know that there's a place that the public can go and keep an eye on when that's going to happen in their jurisdiction, so to speak. Wade, how about at the IPAWS program? It looks like you've got a pretty good handle on being able to get the messages out to the phones. I certainly get plenty of them. My colleagues, friends, and family do as well. What can we expect in a couple of years from now? We're going to get full motion video out of you guys. What's going to happen?
Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed. I think that's very doable. I'd say one way to roll part of our vision into 3 letters is AOE. So really, we're pursuing alerts on everything. And the private sector, our partners, the folks on this call here are leaning in to put the systems in place to make that a reality. And that's a big deal for us. I think also really we want to make EAS new again, to include helping our AOE vision. We have, there's a new digital TV coming. It's deployed in a few stations around the country. The AWARN Alliance actually put the core information standard, the Common Alert Protocol, that all alerts that move through IPAWS are in. That's in the industry standard for that new TV, digital TV platform that's coming. And I think that and really rolling into, we're getting some assistance again from Congress prompted, and the FCC is leaning into all the streaming services. So as people migrate their attention to different things, or they're consuming content via different means, the ability to make sure that emergency information, when it needs to get there, to those people, no matter what they're paying attention to.
Right. So if you've got an individual that's on a laptop and is watching Amazon Prime or whatever, you're going to be able to tap into that capability as well and blast a message into there. Super important, right? As everyone's sort of dealing with these omni-channel environments that they're operating in on basically a daily basis. Billy Bob Brown, Tell us what it's going to look like in a couple of years there. You're kind of sitting on the top of this, trying to pull all this together, you and your organization over there. What's it look like in 2 to 3 years?
Thanks. The interesting component that I see as we look forward into the future is how voice, video, data, and information services on behalf of operators that are providing for the safety of our citizens is pulled together through the entirety of the emergency communications ecosystem. As Lori talked about, text and multimedia to 911, as Wade talked about, having the ability for multimedia to eventually be pushed out through alerts and warnings to give granular kinds of information to citizens to help them understand what the threat and the challenges are. What we want to help make sure that we're looking at all of this advancement into the all IP and connected environment recognizes is risks and challenges that face us today. A few years ago, when we were talking about challenges for emergency communications and public safety, we were really only talking about, focusing on trying to do effective and integrated partnering and planning against, challenges that were reflected in, destructive and disruptive weather, accidents and challenges that cause congestion, and the need for priority access for our first responders. However, today, we recognize that there's thinking challenges, criminality all across the world that's organized, and even nation state considerations, force us to think more broadly and understand that the emergency communications ecosystem has challenges. What if there were malware embedded in that multimedia that was sent to 911, that eventually went to the cruiser, that was eventually sent out as part of an alert or warning that now potentially has challenges that infect large numbers of emergency communications systems across a large area? And if that was pre-planned, so the idea of looking at the risks that face all of our national critical functions and understanding those challenges in the all IP environment and the cybersecurity challenges that pose our connected emergency communication systems is what we see in the future as we move towards, more of a partnering, more of a close collaborative working together amongst all of our communicators, whether they're information technologies specialists, whether they're communication spectrum specialists, whether they're wired infrastructure specialists or satellite specialists, all working together because we recognize that for the safety of the citizen, where those seconds count, we do have to work together faster in order to solve those problems, to prevent that adaptive, dynamic, and active thinking threat from hampering and hindering and challenging and disrupting our emergency services as they're trying to provide for safety of citizens. And that's where we're going. That's where I see us working. That's where we're actively continuing to build partnerships. Just a little plug: CISA is hiring. www.cisa.gov. We are always looking to bring on new talent to help us continue to advance the security and the resilience across the nation against what we know are the risks that face us, which, as I sort of articulated, encompassed in this thinking threat is one that really takes all of us working together. That is why we are the United States. We are stronger together.
Really do appreciate that. And I'll put in an additional plug for all of you that have never tried public service. Give it a try because it tastes great. That's my punchline there. I want to thank all of the guests today for taking their time out of their busy schedules to join us on this program. So important for every American citizen to hear this. And we really do appreciate all of you together fighting the good fight to keep us all safe, quite frankly. I'd like to thank our sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make this program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.